what we heard from Tim Cook and Amazon, was it as a big surprise for you in terms of the supply chain bottlenecks? And what does this mean for the current quarter?
Sure. A little bit of yes and no. The yes is that we all know what's going on. But to be fair, I think that most of us analysts and myself, thought that Apple, being who they are and their capabilities, were going to be able to muster it much better. Apple has not been given actual revenue guidance for the last couple of quarters now. They just give intention. So obviously we can come up with our best number. But they obviously did fall short this quarter. And actually we're talking about missing $6 billion in revenue, as you just heard from Tim Cook. But actually it's going to be even larger next quarter, which is obviously their biggest quarter, the December quarter.
And at what point do you think, people are saying, look, the demand is still strong. It's not really so much of a shortage or a shortage as well. At what point, though, do you think the supply chain snags are going to start hitting demand? Because if I'm not going to get my iPhone 13 by Q1 or Q2 of next year, wouldn't everyone just start waiting and pushing off and waiting for the next model?
I think that a lot of iPhone's customers are very loyal. So I think that a lot of the demand will be just pushed out, as we saw with the pandemic quarters last year. It got pushed out just into the beginning of the year. So, I think that besides a December quarter, you could see them having a stronger than expected seasonal March quarter than is normally the case. And most are expecting by maybe mid-year, but it could be even till September when things start to catch up. They did say it's not leading nodes, it's actually lagging or legacy nodes. And the issue is you need to have a matched set of everything before you can build something.
Louis, David here. We saw quite a dip in the after hours post-market trade here. Would you be a buyer of that dip? If so, why? If not, why not?
Our rating has been is an outperform rating. So we have a positive view on the shares. And we've had a very positive view about the 5G upgrade cycle, all the services. Going back to when we launched 3 years ago on Apple, our view has been the services are one of the key drivers of everything. So we don't think that this situation in and of itself is something. It's every company, tech company and non-tech company are dealing with the same thing. So really, is something that we stay constructive on.
Louis, we're obviously glad that you're on the show. And I was looking through your report. I think Yvonne was mentioning this earlier already, but I was wondering if you could flesh this out a little bit more for us. Where
Please.
Exactly, when you talk about semiconductors, where is it a genuine shortage? Where is it simply just a lack of supply because demand is just so robust? And when you look at what's happening in the global auto industry, what is the problem that's happening there?
Well, so to talk about the auto for a second and then try to answer the other parts of the question, what basically happened when they went into the pandemic, that the auto companies like to keep their costs as low as possible, and they cut a tremendous number of their orders. They're usually only about 10% of the revenue of most semiconductor companies or less. So when they finally start to get back ordering, they really went to the back of the queue and back of the line. And the tech companies are the ones that jump back in much quicker. So, that really hurt them. Plus, as Tim Cook said, he says that they're getting the leading edge components that they need. They're not getting legacy. And there's been less of an investment in legacy. And now that seems to be the problem there. And then what was the other beginning half of the question?
Oh, I was wondering what part of, when we talk about shortages, it seems like everyone's throwing everything in one basket. And I'm wondering, when you look at, we're talking about Apple, for example, is that really a shortage, or is that because demand is just so robust?
It's for some companies, it's definitely been a little bit of both. If you look at AMD's numbers, that were another beat and raise, very strong. They're able to deliver the product that they have. Qualcomm has done the same. Their numbers have been massively higher than when they started the year 12 months ago, sometimes by billions of dollars. But even with that said, and this is, I think, actually my analyst opinion, something good for semiconductors in that it's elongating, I think, the up cycle instead of the typical very strong up cycle and then a down cycle. So I think that we're going to have for semis, and I've had this in my preview note and I've had it in many of my other reports, a good year in 2022 too, because we're seeing less highs, but I think that will then make the growth longer.
And just kind of walking through your top picks here, you're still positive on Qualcomm, AMD, and Apple, but a bit cautious when it comes to Intel. Why? Talk us through the thinking behind that.
Well, we've been cautious on Intel for quite a while. And the main thing we were cautious on was them trying to move into the foundry business. Every time we've seen Intel try to go to their next node, they ramp up, unfortunately, the depreciation. So we thought as they ramp up foundry, that was going to hit them from a gross margin standpoint. As it turns out, Pat Gelsinger, who I've covered VMware for many years now, so I know him well, decided to get very aggressive. And not only that, he wants to sort of really catch up a lot faster on nodes. But this is still going to take 3 years. And they took their, obviously, gross margin guidance down to 51 to 53%, well below what the street was expecting. The prior guidance is more their expectation around 57% in the future years. So this is really lower for a lot longer. And there's just really no way around it other than spend money and try to get back on track. And investors generally don't like that approach. For the obvious reasons, you don't really know what's going to happen.